Hey, Dave, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Zach.
So today we have Dave Ponder, and for anybody that knows me or him, you probably know we are very old friends of going on like 35 years now, which is
Yeah,
nuts. We also have a podcast together called Life Lab. If you haven't
we
checked it
do.
out, you should, where we talk about principles to live the good life. But we also share some businesses together, and we live a mile away, so we know each other very well. And that is not why I brought Dave on to discuss why soft skills are hard skills. I brought him on because he has deep levels of expertise in communication. His background, I'd like to describe Dave as a technologist. He's somebody that thinks deeply about the digital tools that we create, how that can positively impact our personal and professional lives. His business is called Cential, spelled Cential, and he has two other business partners there where they offer a wide variety of GRC solutions, which is kind of a niche technological field that stands for governance, risk, and compliance. So, my way to explain that would be they help companies protect the information that needs to stay private and create systems of controls to ensure that only the right people have access to it. But then they also help companies develop what I'd call risk roadmaps to make strategic decisions about how they think about the unknown, how they think about loss, and how their technology footprint ties into that. Would that be a decent way to explain it?
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head, and the only thing I would add to it is we help organizations with that journey that they go on from immature when thinking about dealing with risk and compliance to trying to mature the way that they think about those processes and the way that they support them with their technology. The immature ones end up putting their toe into the water, usually because they're forced to by things like compliance regulations and requirements that they have to fulfill due to their industry or their locale. And then as they get down that road and they understand that actually there can be some value in thinking about the things that they're required to do from a strategic perspective tied to their business objectives and protecting their business objectives, and that's toward the more mature end of things. And we really help them in two areas, which I would argue are both technology. That's processes and technological systems. Usually computer systems, applications, things like that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Nice. So I love that. And that makes sense for people with a higher level of expertise in business organization. How do you explain what you do to your daughter, Marin, who's going into fifth grade, or to Claudia in sixth grade in a way that conceptually captures what you're doing, but in a more palatable way?
I mean, I tell Marin that I help organizations use technology to achieve the things that they're trying to achieve. Um, Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that. And she's inquisitive, so we get into it. But if I had to use one sentence, that's how I tell her.
Perfect. I love that. And you just mentioned that processes are technologies, and I like that, and I know that. But tell me a little bit more. Like, what are some things that the average person wouldn't think of being a technology in a business setting that you guys have to account for and discuss?
There are terms that we use that are, things that you run across in everyday life, but when you use these terms, you're talking about them in a certain context. So one of them that I would use um, it's called a control, right? And if you think about what a control is, it breaks down into two components. One is the rule or the standard part of the control. So think of it as like you must wear a seatbelt when you're in a traveling car. And then there's the procedure part of the control, which is how do you achieve that? And that would be, specifically describing how I grab the seatbelt, I pull it down across my chest, I buckle it in, and because you could do it incorrectly, right? Like you could do that procedure incorrectly, and it wouldn't achieve the control's objective, right? You could
Like
be
my
like, I lean
son,
forward, I grab it, I put it
yep.
behind my back, and I plug it in, right?
Ben
Now the
wraps it around his
seatbelt's behind
arm.
you.
Yeah.
There you go, right? And so those are two components of the control. And that second part is the process part, right? And so if you think about each process, you can do processes in a more efficient and better manner. And when you start, you don't think about things in your day-to-day processes that you do because it's low impact and not too resource intensive. But as you get to be a large organization, these processes have large impacts on both the risk that you have to your business objectives, and they are very resource intensive in performing. And so when I say it's processes or a technology, a lot of the advisory work and the consulting that we do is around how to improve those processes and how to string multiple processes together in an efficient manner that achieves the objectives that you're still trying to go for. And then obviously backing that up with technology to help like give it a framework, support it, automate it, etc.
Perfect. And I know you're using AI as well now, and we'll dig into that in a second. But let's do some shameless self-promotion. Why are you good at your job? What makes Dave Ponder good at his job?
I think I'm actually good at this job in a way because I think a little differently than most people in this field, in this arena. And I've noticed it when I've gone to conferences, and the last conference that I went to really like solidified that to me in that I think more outside of the box. And I think in a field that is all about, like I said, this starts with compliance, right? Which is a bureaucratic thing, which is red tape. Um, and I have a disdain for bureaucracy and red tape. And so it's really interesting that I ended up in this field helping organizations become compliant with bureaucratic red tape, but also then thinking about, okay, so like these are things that we have to do. Like we don't have choice about these things. This applies to everybody's personal life too, right? Like you have things that you have to do because of authority figures or to just get along in society, right?
Right.
But as a kid, you can read the book that we wrote together, right? Friendship LLC, and you'll see like I have a healthy rebellion against authority and against arbitrary rules that I feel don't actually achieve anything or don't help anything. And so I think that actually gives me a little bit of a different angle when I'm thinking about things for organizations to say, all right, so we have to achieve this, we have to do this, we have to check this box, but like, how can we do it in a way that's smart, efficient,
And
etc.
yeah, that doesn't strip people of their autonomy potentially.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like this industry that I'm in is um it's conservative. We're talking about a lot of the people that I talk to are in risk management, and so they're very, very conservative and they're in compliance. So it's pulled me out of my comfort zone when it comes to how informal I like to be about things. But I'd say it's one of the ways that I succeed is that I think about things a little bit differently, I think, than the average person in this industry.
I like that. And I'm going to add on top of that, the main reason I wanted to bring you on to soft skills or hard skills is I've seen you in the trenches, on the battlefields, taking these difficult technological and conceptual terms and frameworks and translating them for either your clients or for prospects. So walk me through, the role of communication. So let's start there. Like, how do you take these very dense and loaded terms with precise meanings that make sense to your firm and maybe to a CISO and a CIO, and we'll explain what those are. How do you make sense of that stuff to a CEO or a COO?
Well, to a CEO or a COO, you have to be concise.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to boil a lot of information down into some heavy hitting bullet points. Like bullet points matter. You try to get your point across to them in that way, and then allow them to dig deeper if they so choose. You want to entice them to dig deeper. So you want to give them bullet points that have some meaning and that have some weight to them, to signify importance to what it is that you're talking about. But ultimately, then it's just letting them dig in. And if you're talking about CEOs,
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, like if I'm talking to operators, like business control owners, business area owners, analysts, managers, folks like that, I have to do a lot of listening, which is something that I haven't been good at historically, and took a lot of time and feedback for me to understand my deficiencies in that area. Understanding what it is that they're saying is crucial when you're talking about these loaded terms and you're getting very deep into process. And oftentimes I'll realize that they're either using a term differently than what we do as what we would consider the standard way to use the term, which can indicate misunderstanding, or we'll understand that there's something that they're saying that isn't quite lining up with the rest of the group's expectations. And then from there, it's up to me to dig in and ask some clarifying questions and understand where that gap is, and then try to hold that mirror up and say, wait a minute, you're saying this is what I'm hearing. Which one is correct?
I like that. And one of the things I've thought you're always good at is the lack of latency, if you will, from which you can listen to what somebody's saying and then come up with a metaphor or an analogy to Velcro their misunderstanding to what they should actually be thinking. And I can do that as well, but I have to do it in a way where I sort of plan. I do a little research about the person and I come up with a metaphor field, if you will, that might tie into some interests that they have or their field. So I have some prep work, some leg work to do, but I can get there and do it pretty smoothly. You just naturally come up with metaphors and you can switch them quickly. So like, how do you do that?
I don't know. That's just how my brain works. I think my brain's good at like making connections between complicated things and like everyday things, and trying to come up with what is it that anyone would understand, right? Like the seatbelt.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't give that much thought. I just connected the fact that like we all do things that reduce risk in our daily lives. That would be, to a business, they do these things like, a clear one that everyone would understand would be not letting someone who does development on their computer systems have access to move that to production, right? To actually make those changes. There should be a third party involved. If anyone has seen the movie Office Space, you see what happens if that control is not in place. So in an organizational context, you can talk about these complex controls. And I was just trying to think, what is something that everybody does every day that lowers risk? That anyone could relate to at least.
Yeah, the seatbelt.
I don't know. My brain is decent at making those.
Yeah, no, that's great. But I think for the audience, you might have to be more like me if your brain isn't wired to naturally do that and come up. The whole point, you're not going to win a sale or explain things or maybe even solve the client's problem if you can't explain it effectively, because folks that don't have deep technical expertise are going to be very skeptical of whatever it is you're talking about because they don't understand it. That's a puncture to their ego at some point.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually something that as I'm speaking with someone and I'm using technical terms or I'm describing a complicated process, I'm constantly checking in with them to try to gauge their level of receptiveness and understanding of the things that I'm saying. And when that breaks down, right, either when I can tell that they have missed something or they aren't fully understanding something, or they're telling me, wait a minute, what do you mean? That's when analogies really come into play, to help bridge that gap, I think.
Nice. Perfect. Well, let's talk about communication at a different level. You're growing your business. It's scaling. You're adding resources, not just headcount, capital, talented capital that you pay good salaries to. So if anybody's interested in GRC, Cential's probably hiring. But also you're adding new services and AI. So first, give us a little plug about this AI subsidiary or venture that you're building, but then talk about communication for scaling and building a team.
Okay. So, I've always been curious, and it's one of the ways that I like to get some passion in the work that I do is to integrate things that we're curious about and that we think would be useful to integrate into the business. And so AI is obviously it's everywhere. Everybody's interested in it right now. It's really caught on fire, but we're trying to integrate AI right into the systems and processes that people use for GRC on a daily basis. So I'll leave it at that.
Sure.
If you're interested, you can hit our LinkedIn page,
Sure.
Cential CENTIAL. You can see the videos that we posted about our AI integrations that we're doing with various GRC platforms. What was your question though?
Perfect. So you're running Central. Now you've spun out another company using this AI that plugs into Central and sort of is a value add on top of that. That involves scaling. That involves adding people. So what is the role of communication on the leadership management side of your business as you continue to add headcount and adapt your services?
Yeah, it's about being proactive in your communication, which is something that isn't naturally, that doesn't come naturally to me. Um, I'd say like I'm good at deep relationships. I'm not good at touching base proactively with many people, right? Like that's something that you are very strong at. And you kind of serve as a hub of people. Maybe you're like a connector. Proactive communication, as a leader, you have to intentionally be proactive about your communication to folks, right? And you'll see the benefits of that if you watch any show about business and organizations. Like what's the one where the undercover boss, right? Where you have some CEO or whatever comes down and he gets to the very lowest level and gets to interact with people in a way that never would happen in the course of his daily business. And they get these insights that they would never have otherwise. And so I'd say being proactive and putting yourself in a spot to communicate with folks that's outside of the course of daily business, which is a really difficult thing to do, especially when you're time constrained. So I'd say be intentional in your communication. Obviously, oftentimes that's going to be through marketing channels, communication channels, your whatever HR folks are telling you these are the ways that we need to communicate this down to people, depending on the size of your organization. But I would say, the more powerful things that are going to give you more insight would be just one-on-one touch bases with folks that are outside of the course of daily business and try to
I
get,
like that.
yeah.
No, that makes sense. What about decision making? I mean, you're in the business of making effective decisions and advising your clients to make better decisions tied to technology and GRCs. So let's just be blunt. You're very smart. Everyone at your company is very smart. You really can't be doing what you guys are doing without having cognitive horsepower and being able to see problems from many different angles. So when you and your team are in the trenches, problem solving, brainstorming, whatever you call it at Central, how do you guard against yourself and your two business partners when you're really just talking things out loud or talking through a process? How do you guard against your team hearing that being like, oh, this is what we have to do. These are our marching orders.
We just had an instance where we made a decision and we then began to execute on the decision. We briefly told the team what the decision was, and then we began to execute on that decision, and it impacted what everyone's doing. It's a day-to-day change, right? So we were actually putting in some controls on our internal environment that are going to change the way folks' laptops work, right? We communicated the reason why we were doing it, but we only communicated the bare bones, like this is why we are doing this. That's it, right? And that left their minds open to say, okay, is this just the start of something bigger, right? And we kind of pride ourselves at Centralize being the place that allows you to be innovative. We talk about the terms of autonomy, mastery, and purpose in your work, and autonomy is a big one of those. And we try to find that balance, right? Because we are in risk management compliance, where we have to make sure that we have certain measures and controls and processes in place, but we try to find a balance that still allows innovation and tries to minimize that red tape. And that's just kind of built into our culture. And so I think this was something that was a red flag in some folks' minds. And it made its way back to us that some employees were asking questions about, well, what's next? And how is this going to impact when I'm trying to test out a new application or try this new thing? And the three partners kind of realized, wait a minute, we did a good job in communicating why we made the decision, but we didn't give the bigger, broader context around that decision.
Mm,
Now, I don't think you can do that all the time because
right.
communication takes time, right?
Right.
And we're limited by language, text or speech, however you're going to get it out to your people. But in this instance, we realized we did need to give a little bit more context around that decision. And I would just say, in general, I've been at large organizations where decisions are made, the decision is pushed down, and there's no explanation about why that decision was made. It's just, oh, this is what we're doing. Everybody get on board with it, right? And that's rough. I don't like
Yeah.
that type of environment myself. I like understanding at least if there's a decision that's being made and it's going to impact me. I at least want to know the reasoning behind it, right? And I think we do a decent job of at least giving the reasoning behind where the decisions that we're making
Good.
to our employees to let them understand, right? Like put yourselves in our position. You have to make this decision, right? These are our reasons.
Yeah.
At least then they understand.
No, I like it. A couple of thoughts. One, it sounds like you did a good job, a B plus job communicating with the folks, but you adopted the CEO strategy. Give them the high level bullet point and let them fill in the rest and dig in. Well, they dug in and wanted more. Um, so perhaps giving them a little more. But the second thing, it's all about connecting it to that strategy, the strategic roadmap, what's coming down the pipe, what other changes can they expect? And as you said, that's not always predictable. And simply saying that sometimes, like, here's where we're at now, things could change. We're not certain. When we know more, you're going to know more. And as long as it's not an environment of distrust and cynicism, they should hopefully be able to accept that.
And we communicated our intention. I think
But
that's kind of what you're talking about there
yeah,
too, right?
the why. Yeah.
So
I think it's IBM. I might be wrong on that, but the co founder of one of the largest tech organizations in the world that's been around a long time, and this was all pre-internet, pre-email. Whenever anybody was creating a meeting internally or rescheduling a meeting, everything was done by memo. It was literally handwrite it, and then the internal courier takes it to the people. If you didn't give your reason for creating a meeting or rescheduling one, you were fired. And he held to that. But he's like, we're strapped for time. We have to at least give the why for things. And you guys did that. So I'd say kudos. What about being an owner operator in terms of communication, getting in from grinding out client work to working on the business, strategic thinking, having to hire, fire, think about comp and benefits, digging in, doing creative GRC, technological problem solving? What is that like in terms of communication, both with your partners or with your team?
difficult. Yeah, I would say, it's one of the reasons why I lean on my partners for many things. We split responsibilities because of that. It's hard for me to go from being down in the trenches and in the weeds, executing on some client project work, to stopping my mind momentum, zooming out and seeing the big picture and realizing, oh, I have to communicate on these things, right? I have a lot of friction in those areas. So there are just tactics that I have in place to try to do that. Simple things that are notes, reminders to myself, calendar entries, tasks, etc., with pop-ups reminding me to do things that I have to try to get over that. Kind of just need something to break up the momentum in my mind to say, wait a minute, stop, zoom out, think about the big picture, think about your entire scope of responsibility. I have a mind map that I drew out, and I redo it every 3 months or so because responsibility areas change as projects pop up and drop off. And I'll just look at that mind map and say, where am I at?
Nice.
And all these things. What's needed to do? So yeah.
I like that. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have one more question for you, but any final thoughts or comments about just communication, soft skills, the importance of that, especially being in a very hard skilled industry?
Yeah, we talked mainly about technology and processes, but everything boils down to people and communication. Uh, I haven't seen many projects fail because the technology couldn't achieve what they were trying to do. I've seen many projects fail because of poor communication, poor governance structures that are in place, and poor culture, and all of that just boils down to people and communication. And so it's one of the things that folks in our industry recognize, but don't emphasize. And I think our industry can improve in that area. Yeah.
Nice. And just to clarify for folks, when you say the G in GRC is governance, I make sense of that as decision-making authority.
It is. I mean, that's right. That's what it is. And they put, there are things that you try to achieve to put in place structures, committees, charters that define responsibilities and describe decision making authority. And those are all necessary components and foundations of that G and GRC. Executing on them, though, is also very important. And that's where everything that you do comes into play.
Perfect. Well, we're right at time. I want to make sure I honor that. I know you're have a full and fulfilling schedule, much like me. So a couple high-level things. A reminder, he's in a very technical industry, folks. We didn't go down that at all. If you're ever in a room getting to listen to Dave talk on the phone, it literally sounds like he's speaking another language, which always makes me laugh. But he talked about the importance of being a proactive communicator. Also, the importance of thinking about uncommon things in our environment are actually technologies. Rules and processes are technologies. We just don't think of them that way. And those can influence how we communicate in both positive and negative or unproductive ways. Use metaphors. Be a translator. If I had a word for Dave, I think he's excellent in business because he's a creative problem solver, but he's an excellent translator. The ability to take something technical and explain it in a way that helps people understand rather than comes off condescending. The easiest way to create private resentments is to make someone else feel dumb, and that can be very easy in a highly skilled technical field like that. Remember that his field recognizes but does not prioritize the importance of people, human capital, communication, culture. And Dave said that a lot of projects he sees fail because of those soft things that are harder to quantify than the actual technologies themselves. So even if you're not in IT services, just remember the people side and communication, it is important and it is a hard skill to develop. So put in some time and effort to do so. Anything else?
No, I think I would just qualify my statement about prioritizing the people aspect. I could see getting some pushback from folks in the industry about that, but I would just say, as far as the amount of time that is given to it in any project, is, in my opinion, too small.
And I'll qualify his qualifier. Anytime my clients tell me that something is a priority in their business, I ask two simple questions, and this is usually of a C-level person. Great, I believe you. Just show me your calendar and show me your checkbook. How much time are you spending on it inside of a project or a day-to-day basis, and how much money are you kicking towards it? If both of those levels are low, you do not prioritize it, and you're selling yourself on a false story. So
that's right.
Perfect.
That's right.
Well, hey, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I know the audience is going to take away a lot today. See you, Dave.
All right. Thanks, Zach.